Welcome to Frequency Matters, the RF and Microwave Update Series. I'm Pat Hindle. I'm here with my co-host Gary LaRude. In this episode, we're going to take a look at our January radar and antennas issue. The cover feature is about the design of a millimeter wave MIMO radar. It operates at 60 gigahertz using the frequency modulated continuous wave mode. So they had very good specifications that they were aiming to meet. They want fast imaging rates of better than 200 hertz. And they also wanted to get range resolution of better than 5 centimeters. So good specifications there to design to. And they go through the design of the RFIC and then the system. And then they analyze and give measured results. So it's a very thorough article and a good one to check out.
Yeah.
So what else do we have for technical features?
Well, we have several on the antenna theme from Roden Schwartz, combining measurement with full wave simulation for assessing complex antennas and systems. So you might think of a millimeter wave array mounted in the windshield of a car, and how would you evaluate that? We have an app note from Pasternak that talks about dual ridge guide horn antennas. That's interesting. And then our online spotlight, I think, is interesting. It's talks about how do you improve university courses on antenna theory and design to make them more hands-on, more experiential, to give the student a better sense of what they'll actually see in industry. And our last article I'll mention from Qorvo on additive phase noise and amplifiers. This is written lead author Lily Geller, who is an intern at Qorvo, spent the summer working on this, and she's also, you may recall, one of the Women in Engineering Scholarship recipients from Custom Mimic. So I'm really pleased that we were able to give her a forum to publish her work, which is really good.
Yeah, it's good to see more young talent into our industry that is kind of aging in a way.
Exactly.
So turning to news and events, kind of putting them together because it was a big week for virtual shows. Both European Microwave Week and the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the big gadgetry show of the year, both took place online. So European Microwave Week was supposed to take place last October in the Netherlands. They delayed to January in hopes of having a physical event, but had to go virtual like everybody else. And it was very interesting. They were able to pre-record all the conference sessions and actually keep the same time progression that they had originally done with the schedule in the Netherlands time zone. So that went off very well. They were able to get as many of the delegates as they were able to get physically, so that was successful on that end. So I listened to the keynotes and I heard the NXP CTO. He talked about radar sensors and how they're using those for autonomy and the connected vehicle and all that space to improve safety and get to the next level of autonomy. And he also pointed out a new trend that I think is going to be big this year, and that's ultra-wideband for positioning technologies.
Right.
So they're starting to put that into mobile devices and be able to have a plethora of applications on where you're located and automatically turn things on and off and improve safety and security. So that's interesting. Cool. And so turning to the exhibition, they had more than 100 exhibitors in 4 halls. And Hall 1 was the exhibitors that chose to upgrade to the 3D booth, and that's an actual rendering of what their physical booth was going to be in the Netherlands, so that was pretty cool. And the VFairs platform that they're using was fantastic, and I think, going forward, this is a very good platform for other shows to look at and use. And so I just wanted to kind of quickly summarize those 8 companies that were in Hall 1 because we can't cover all 100.
Right.
And one thing I did notice in the test and measurement companies, they're really marketing 5G and 6G together as a high-frequency broadband solutions. And so I'm seeing that all the time now as 5G/6G instead of just 5G alone. And so I took a look at Keysight Technologies, and they have that emphasis on the broadband high-frequency measurements, and they're able to measure the continuous spectrum all the way up to 220 gigahertz now. Very impressive. And then moving to Roden Schwartz, again, the 5G, 6G theme was there. And they have a millimeter wave test system now that goes to 170 gigahertz. Again, very impressive test systems. They're also marketing their automotive and SATCOM solutions. And then I went to NI, again, 5G, 6G. And another interesting thing they had was a automotive radar test system that has a full 4 gigahertz of bandwidth. So that's very capable there. And finally, Copper Mountain, one of the most impressive companies I've seen over the last 3 to 5 years. They came into the market with a very low-cost VNA solution, and now they're providing very high-performance solutions across the board. They have materials measurement, characterization of filters, amplifiers, mixers, and so on. So they're really doing well.
Yeah, they're one of the companies we featured as a Fabs and Labs this last year.
So how about you, I think, for the other half of the Hall 1?
Well, continuing the Hall 1, you mentioned Keysight. The Keysight partners included Mori Microwave, Virginia Diodes, Form Factor, and W.L. Gore with their respective capabilities. And then we had Rosenberger. Of course, they do high-performance cables and connectors, and those are situated well for test and calibration applications. Ohmic was very big there. They are pushing their GaN PAs, as well as very highly complex core chips. And then we had, to round out that hall, Fraunhofer, TNO, and VTT, each with exhibits and things that show what they're doing in the industry. So it was a nice collection, pretty comprehensive and wide-ranging in Hall 1.
So turning to the Consumer Electronics Show, the big daddy of gadgetry, so I always love to see what comes out of that show. So I think my favorite new consumer electronics company is LG Electronics. I really love what they're doing. They had a couple really cool innovations. One was a see-through TV. So this is a 55-inch TV. Essentially, it looks like a TV image projected onto a piece of glass. Why you'd want to do that, I have no idea, but it's cool. And then they also had one that I think is practical. And a couple years ago, they released this rollable, flexible screen that they did for TVs that would actually roll out of a bundle. And now they've applied that to mobile devices. So they're going to release a phone that has an expandable screen with that rollable technology. So you'll be able to fit it in your pocket as a phone, take it out, and expand the display into a tablet format for doing gaming or watching movies. So I think that's practical.
Yeah, very practical.
So another growing trend that I see this year, in addition to 5G, is Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E. That's really Wi-Fi on steroids. The Wi-Fi 6 standard expanded the bandwidth and channels, giving more capacity, and they also lowered the latency. So now you can use it in other applications that take advantage of that low latency for IoT, gaming, AR and VR, automotive. So I think it's really going to take off this year. And the Wi-Fi 6E standard opens up the 6 gigahertz band, which will really increase capacity as 5 gigahertz is getting crowded and 2.4 gigahertz is really crowded. So they always have to keep going up in frequency. It's never enough. So to that end, NXP had a briefing with me, and they've released a 6E solution that's 4x4 MIMO, and they plan on doing an 8x8 MIMO version soon too. This takes advantage of the full 160 megahertz of channel bandwidth, and also achieves physical data rates of up to 4.8 gigabits per second. So it really is fast, and the latency is very low, so it'd be really interesting to see how this takes off. And I also took a look at Analog Devices, and they are really in a thought leadership mode at this show. They had all their VPs out talking about various really exciting applications, from drone delivery to autonomous vehicles to really interesting wearable applications. So they're doing really well, and also as supplying components, but also at a systems level advising their customers on how to do that really well. And lastly, I wanted to cover Fractus Antennas. That's a really interesting Spanish company that has taken off, and we've followed them for the last few years. They now have 25 million virtual antenna chips in IoT applications, tremendous amount. And they're now in the reference designs for major vendors like Sierra Wireless and Nordic Semiconductor and a bunch of others. So they're really doing well.
Yeah, they're a great group of people.
Yes. How about you for CES?
Well, a couple of things. Qorvo had several product announcements. You mentioned Wi-Fi 6E. They introduced 2 FEMs for Wi-Fi 6E. Then 4 LNA mimics, more for the base station side of the market, particularly things like massive MIMO. These cover basically 100 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, so all the 4G and 5G bands. And amazingly, noise figure down to 0.3 of a dB.
I noticed that. That's impressive.
I'm not sure how you could even measure that these days. And then they have 2 antenna routing switches that are for automotive e-call system, which allows them to switch antennas if a car were in an accident, for example. Then for Skyworks, another major player at CES, they didn't have as many new products to introduce, but they did announce that one of their Wi-Fi 6E FEMs has been designed into an Asus gaming console. They claim that's the first gaming console on the market now that goes to Wi-Fi 6E. And then they were demonstrating a small cell power amplifier that's also being used in massive MIMO. They say they've shipped more than 1 million of these parts. It basically covers 3.3 to 3.7, so a key band for 5G systems. And they were demoing it using a TI transceiver and Xilinx crest factor reduction and digital pre-distortion, so they could show the whole closed loop performance and covering a 200 megahertz channel bandwidth with 28 dBm output power. And then the non-RF product that caught my eye, although I think all of our viewers and we can relate to it, is a Targus disinfecting LED light. So it sits on your desk, shines on your keyboard, turns on once an hour for 5 minutes and disinfects the keyboard, kills any virus or bacteria or whatever may be there. So that's a practical gift, and I think it's going to be available later this quarter. So
Yeah, there were a lot of COVID innovations that were interesting, from face masks to disinfecting.
right. So as you said, 2021 is off to a rapid start. We've had 2 shows already, and there's a mad rush to get everybody vaccinated before IMS in Atlanta, so we can all gather there in person. So that's it for this episode. We want to thank our sponsors, RFMW. They're a pure play distributor of RF and microwave products, and you find that they represent most all the leading RF and microwave companies. And we want to welcome Sivers Semiconductors as a sponsor this time. They are a photonics supplier and RFIC supplier doing a lot of work at 60 gigahertz and the 28 gigahertz 5G bands. So we look forward to learning more about them. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back in a couple weeks.